So yes, we will continue from here. And so we click. And so what I wanted to get into now, we mentioned earlier this concept of the Odoo E5. And we mentioned beforehand that the word Odoo means oracular utterance. And it is cognate with the Egyptian word Medu, where we get Medu Neter, or the words of God. We can, say now the oracular words of God, the codes of God. And so this would be conceptually cognate with the Bumo of the Dogon tradition, which talks about the signs, which are also the words of God. And so these Odoos are not only in terms of a vocalization in terms of words, but are also represented by signs or marks. And that's what you see here on the side. So when we cast the Opele chain, or the I King, we mark the quote-unquote Odoos, or the oracular signatures from the god of Ifa, or the god Ifa, who speaks on behalf of Oludumare, to the rest of the world. We mark them with these signs or variations of these signs. And so you see these variations. I'm not sure how clear they'll be on your screen, but you'll see these different variations. These are the 16 primary Odoos. But you can see that, some will be called legs. So we can imagine these being 2 legs. These are actually representative of a whole body, but that's beyond the scope of this discussion. But these 2 legs can you can have different combinations. So I can have 2 lines here in terms of a 1-leg Odoo, and 1 line be here, or and then 2 lines here, and then another line, single line here, in terms. So that's what these mean. So if you see 2 lines, that means off, or a single line is on. And so this is all light, so all 4 rows are on, and this is all darkness, so all these are dark. And so again, we can see these represented here. And so this dualism here, or this binary system, this was actually the inspiration behind ultimately what comes down to us as the computer binary system, where we have on and off represented by 1s and 0s. And so those are just symbols for electricity on, which is 1, or electricity off, which is 0. And so this would be, if we was to put this in computer language, this would be 0 and 1. And so these different combinations of 1s and 0s would make up the signature, or would make up the codes for the universe itself. And so this is on a universal plane, and then the 1s and 0s is what we use on the computers. And so there's a book that demonstrates, or at least discusses, it's called African Fractals by Ron Eglash, and in his chapter on the numeric system, he discusses how ultimately the inspiration, because the divination came from Africa into Europe, and it's this African binary system coming out of Odoo Ifa that ultimately gives way to the binary system, which gives way to our computers, that gives way to the logic of the computers and how it works in the modern time. And so everything that you see on your screen right now is just a combination, a series of codes of 1s and 0s in the computer language. There's other languages on top of that. You have the operating system, and then you have the individual compilations of codes on in terms of software and things of that nature. So C++, .NET, a whole different array of languages, even if in your web, in terms of PSP, ASP.NET, HTML, of course, is the frame. So different things like that. So here I just wanted to, show this to you because this is the visual representation, and we're going to see that science actually put forth Odoos, quote unquote, in modern theoretical physics. But before we go there, I want to give a good definition, of what the Odoos represent, coming from a Babalawo. And so there's a Babalawo out of Benin by the name of Joseph Ohamina. And to one of his students, he, discussed what the nature of the Odoos. And so again, we want to emphasize that the Odoo, which is a word for words, oracular utterances of the divine, these are the codes of the divine that, that are behind the energy signatures that make up the universe. So these are the codes and the laws of nature that we're dealing with here. So he goes on to say that the Odoo of Ifa are structures of knowledge, autonomous but interdependent agents that shape and interpret the data-saturated environment, providing portraits of intersubjectivity that are shared between artificial entities and ourselves, dramatizing interaction between synthetic and organic life, provoking exploration and interaction that enhances curiosity in the face of emergent phenomena which are beyond our control. That's a little bit more academic, but then we start to get into the real meat of this. And so the Odoos we're talking about here, they are agents. They are elements of a system, sharing information, adapting and evolving with a changing environment, developing intricate interrelationships. They are spirits whose origin we do not know. Again, the Odoos, they are spirits. Remember, these are words for words, sounds, the thoughts of the divine, which are spirits whose origin we do not know. We understand only a small fraction of their significance. They are the brains behind the efficacy of whatever we prepare. They are the spiritual names of all the phenomena in existence, whether abstract or concrete, plants, animals, human beings, the elements, abstractions such as love, hate, truth, and falsehood, all kinds of situations, concrete forms such as rain, water, land, air, and the stars. Situations such as celebrations, conflicts, ceremonies are represented in spiritual terms by the various Odoo. So an Odoo, again, is a spirit. It is the name of the energy signatures that govern and develop or bring into being phenomena. These are the signature expressions of the thoughts of the divine. And so the thoughts are represented by signs. Here they're called Odoos, and in the Dogon they're called Bumo. And so this leads us to Professor Sylvester James, who in the Physics World magazine wrote a public article. And the difference between the public article and the scientific journal articles is that, of course, the scientific journal articles are written specifically for the people in the field who would understand all of the jargon. And so this is a public article, but in a physics magazine, so that the layman can, at least understand if they have some familiarity with physics. And so the article is called Symbols of Powers, Adinkras in the Nature of Reality. And so he's a theoretical physicist out of MIT, and him and his team have discovered basically that there are codes, self-error correcting codes, that their analysis of certain mathematical equations demonstrate that are governing basically the universe. And so he calls these codes adinkras. And it's interesting because the word adinkras is a word that they say means goodbye, to the dead. But I think it's really more so words of the soul. And if it's words of the soul, we're talking about spiritual words, which are these particular adinkra signs that they used to put on the fabrics and coffins or whatnot of the deceased members of the community, which is why they say it's a goodbye to the dead. But that word cross in the word adin cross is that word okra or ka or kla and kera, meaning soul, spirit. So we see how it's coming back full full circle here. And so, to my knowledge, he is not aware of the deep esoteric and philosophical the philosophical underpinnings of the Adinkras themselves, or the concept of Okra, or the nature of Odoos amongst the Yoruba folks. But we will see in this Physics World article that what he has discovered in terms of these codes supports what the Dogon, with the people in Ghana, and especially the Yoruba folks have been saying in terms of codes that underlie the structure of the universe. And so this is a representation of these codes in terms of shapes, but there's another set of images that are in the article. If you find the article, you'll see on the right hand side here these kind of structures or whatnot, and you see that each one of these little balls is represented by a code. Do you notice something here? That these are what, I would consider these one-leg Odoos. Remember what I told you beforehand, that the zeros and ones represent on and off, and we see here that there's rows of 4. There's these different codes. You see these different combinations. These are the same kind of different combinations that I talk about exist in Odoo E5. And so these are the codes of Odoos with a single leg. You see this 4 here, just like how we see 4, representatives. This is just all off or all on, but there's different combinations that you can have, which comes out to 256 combinations. So that 256 Odoos I talked about earlier, and those 256 Bumo, or signs of Amma, we're seeing this in modern physics. This is a representation. They have no knowledge, to my knowledge, of the Odoo E5 system, but we see that when they're looking into the universe, they have to represent it in the same way that is represented over here in E5, except this one is Meji. This is 2. That's a word, or Eji is the word for 2 in the Yoruba language. But you see here, these ones and zeros, this is the 1 stroke, this will be 1 stroke here, and the 0 will be the 2 strokes here. So we could easily just put the Odoo E5 codes or markings, or Bumo, or signs, or Odoos in place here, and we would have the same thing. And so, it's interesting how all of this is coming together. And so, we're going back, taking a step back again, to the work of, it's a text called The Healing Wisdom of Africa by Malidoma Some. And, he informs us that in the indigenous world, the physical human constitution is regarded as an expression of mind and spirit, and a rather limited expression at that, on page 60. And so we're going back into this concept of mind and spirit. So if we're seeing the Odoos, again, remember that this, the Babalawo informed us that this is the mind, saying of the divine in the representation in terms of spirit. And we see, again, that this concept, even though in English we use the word spirit and soul and mind as different terms, these are the same words fundamentally in many of the African languages. And so the second quote here says, the indigenous belief of the Dagger is that we are primarily spirit. In order to exist as material beings, we have to take a form. And there is the sense among my people that to be in matter is not the most familiar or suitable form for us. So our form fundamentally is represented in the Odoo Ifa in terms of these signs, these codes. This is our soul, this is our spirit. And if I had time, I would show you that, in many African systems, they even say that our spirit or soul is a circle. And, it's interesting that everything in the universe is made up of atoms. And, so when I complete a particular text that I plan to in the future on this topic, I'll bring in all of that data. But, moving back forward, so our spiritual nature is these codes. And so what we see in terms of our physical form is the actual energy in motion, in concentrated motion, expressing these laws or these Odoos or Bumos or signs that fundamentally, make up the human being in any other type of reality that we experience. And so it's interesting that the Hermetic laws, for those who are familiar with the Cabal Yin and the Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes Three Times Great, it was supposed to be written by them and some representatives on behalf of him, which is a European representation or adaptation of the ancient Egyptian deity by the name of Thought. And this is where we get this concept of thought from. It's from the ancient Egyptian deity Jehuti, who represents mathematics, logic, thought, and things of that nature. So that is the underlying essence. Jehuti is the underlying essence, the logic, the laws of the universe. Ma'at is the underlying order, and the primordial essence is what we call the Nun. And so all of these three deities in combination, gave rise to the phenomenon which we see in the universe according to the ancient Egyptian, cosmology. But, I wanted to introduce these 7 Hermetic principles, and primarily these are the 7 laws of the universe in terms of the principle of mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. We just want to focus on the principle of mentalism. And what the people who wrote the Cabal Yin, what they argue is that the all is mind. The universe is mental. The principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that apparent to our material senses, is spirit. So even in modern times, mind and spirit is being equated, which in of itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite, living mind. And so, all of what we're saying here, runs counter to what we find in, at least in the Nation of Islam doctrine. For the African, the all is mind, and the mind is spirit, and that is the nature of the divine. And so, for the Nation of Islam, this will quote unquote be spookism. But there's nothing spooky about this in terms of the relationship to mind and spirit here. And matter of fact, the modern science seems to back the Africans, the indigenous Africans, in their conceptualization of reality. And so that's all God is, in the African mind, is simply reality. It's an infinity. And the laws which make up the universe, it is existence itself. And so this would run counter to the claims of the Nation of Islam as it regards, the conceptualization of God from an African perspective, that God is a human or a man. Not saying that, that men are expressions of the divine, but what the Africans are saying is that, all that God is simply everything and all things at once. And the languages bear this out, and it appears that the modern physics is bearing this out as well. And so and so this gets us actually, I don't have the exact quote that I'm thinking of in my head right now from this book, but this is Dr. Kim Boadinde Kia Bonseki Fukiao, who's an Nganga or a master from Manianga, Congo. He wrote a book in 2001 called The African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, Principles of Life and Living. And in this text, again, he kind of backs up what the author Amadou Hampati Ba was saying in terms of, the relationship to the senses and, in essence, kind of speech. And so he says here, hearing is seeing, and seeing is reacting and feeling. Life is fundamentally a process of perpetual and mutual, supposed to be mutual, communication, and to communicate is to emit and to receive waves and radiations. This process of receiving and releasing or passing on is the key to human beings' game of survival. And so fundamentally what he's talking about here is that fundamentally the universe is speaking, and that is there's a dialogue of energy going around. And so this energy expresses itself as waves and radiations. Minika ye menine, or minia ni. And so there is these different waves communicating with each other. And so, we are bathed in these waves and radiations. And so, in this textbook, you'll find that the ancestral world is not a world where there are human being type figures, walking around enjoying life like we understand it today, at least from the Bantu Congo perspective. That this world, the ancestral world, is simply a realm of accumulated human experiences, the minds and the knowledge of human beings. And so it is a static electro area, with just full of information and thoughts. And so when you're calling on the spirit of your ancestors, what are you really calling? You're really calling on the essence, their minds, the information in which they accumulated over the years. And so what we do when we call on the ancestors, we're calling on a pool of experiences, or accumulated experiences, thoughts, logical processes, problem-solving techniques, and we draw on that spirit. We call on that spirit to enter into us, to enter into our minds, so that we can use the wisdom that they had to be able to solve the kinds of problems that we have in the modern world. And so these are, people from Ghana, the Ga Dangbe people. I won't get into them. I won't get into this. I just, we'll wrap up quickly. This is the opening of the mouth ceremony in ancient Egypt. And there's a text called The Four Moments of the Sun, written by Robert Faris Thomas. And he talks about in here the concept of basically which equates to the opening of the mouth ceremony in the Congo, just like how we find it in ancient Egypt. And so it actually gives us insight into probably what the opening of the mouth ceremony was in ancient Egypt. And so, spirits, quote unquote, can't talk. And so they would ritualize the process that would allow, because, a person just doesn't die and become an ancestor. You have to be made into an ancestor. There has to be a ritual process. And so when you're calling on someone to be an ancestor, you're calling for their spirit to be a medium, to be able to communicate between the world, the realm of eternity, and the living world of human beings. And so, you symbolically and ritually open their mouths in the other world, since they don't have mouths, and you tell them to speak on your behalf, the living community's behalf, and in return, we'll keep your spirit alive. We'll keep your essence, your personality alive by, honoring and worshiping you in real life. And so that's the fundamental essence behind, spiritual ancestral veneration. You're really, calling upon the spirit, the mind of the ancestor, their spirit double, which becomes the static radiating energy that floats around into the universe. You're calling and drawing it into a specific area, and an initiation helps you to be sensitive to those waves of radiations, so that you can draw upon that energy, to draw upon that spirit, draw upon that thought process to be able to solve problems in this world. And so this is what this particular text is talking about. And so this is a Nyombo figure, Jelly and griots in West Africa. I won't go there. And so, I want to, end with a few quotes, one from Amos Wilson, and the next will be from Marcus Garvey. But it shows us the power of the mind if we were going to change things in this world, and how important the mind is, in this process. So Dr. Amos Wilson in his Blueprint for Black Power, page 220, talks about ideology as a source of power. And so we're saying all of this so we can, learn to strengthen our minds and to be able to move forward, not depending on some spirits that we think are ghosts or whatnot to fight on our behalf, but to understand what a spirit is and what spirituality is. And so spirituality in essence is really simply how you translate inspiration into experience. It's taking the ideas from your mind, from the spirit world, into this particular reality. And so the only way that we can do that is if we strengthen our minds. And that's the way that we strengthen our spirits. And so he says here that a source of power, in fact, the ultimate base of power, is the power of ideas, the power of the mind, of thought, imagination, and vision, the power of symbols and the world, the power of ideation and the translation of ideation into action, are manifested in a multitude of personal, social, cultural, and physical forms. And so we have to develop a culture that has a strong emphasis on the development of the mind, because it is the mind, the spirit of the person, that will allow us to live more in harmony with each other. And so this is our source of power, our minds, our intellects. And so we were reminded in the early 1920s by the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey on the benefits of science. And so this was a lecture on the benefits of science. And he says to dive down, black men, and dig. Reach up, black men and women, and pull all nature's knowledge to you. Turn ye around and make a conquest of everything, north and south, east and west. And then when ye have wrought well, you would have inherited God's blessings. You would have become God's chosen people. Naturally, you'll become leaders of the world because of the superiority of your mind, your spirit, your soul, and your achievements. The world is indebted to us for the benefits of civilization. They stole our arts and sciences from Africa. Then why should we be ashamed of ourselves? And out of our own creative genius, we will make ourselves what we want to be. Follow always that great law. There is no height that which you cannot climb without the active intelligence of your mind. Mind creates, and as much as we desire in nature, we can have through the creation of our minds. But in your homes and everywhere possible, you must teach the higher developments of science to your children, and make sure that we have a race of scientists par excellence. For in science lies our only hope to withstand the evil designs of modern materialism. Again, people are thinking that spirituality is lighting some candles or saying some chants or simply calling on the names of your ancestors. That's not spirituality. Spirituality is science. It is taking the knowledge of the laws of the universe and making them work for you and your community, so that in the final analysis you can provide for yourself and your family food, clothing, and shelter. And you always need to be in touch with the spirit world, which is simply the world of the laws of nature. And until we do that, one cannot claim that we are being spiritual by any stretch of the imagination. Spirituality is simply to make spirit a reality. And so that calls for you to understand the laws of the thoughts of nature and to learn the rituals on how to make that manifest in reality. And so anybody listening to this, I would encourage you to get into any kind of artistic endeavor. This will train your mind to be creative and imaginative. As Einstein has said, imagination is more important than science. The science means to know, but imagination is what takes you into the realm of knowing. And so imagination puts you in the realm of the unknown. And I always say that science is really just here to help us to figure out how we can make our imagination, the things in our minds, manifest in reality. And so again, spirituality is people get spirituality and religion mixed up. And religion is a communal thing, but spirituality, let me take that back. They get spirituality and ethics mixed up. And they think that spirituality has anything to do with ethics. Ethics has nothing to do with spirituality. Spirituality is not moral or amoral. It is neutral. It's just a process of transforming spirit into reality. Now we have ethics and morals so that those guide our spirituality, because we just don't want to bring any kind of thing into existence. Because it could be detrimental to the harmony of not only our social systems but our environmental system as well, and to the life energy that we have been blessed with. And so these are the things that we got to think about in terms of really trying to understand what African spirituality is, and to take this quote unquote spookism out of it. And so I should have dealt with Ashe earlier again. Ashe is a coming to pass, the law of command. These are words, and so this is the power of sound to make things happen. And that's Ashe in the ancient Egyptian language. Ashe staffs. I'll just I'll deal with this. I'll just skip that. Here's a few texts. If you want to know a little bit more about African spirituality, here's some more texts for you in terms of the Yoruba systems and just African spirituality in general. Some more of the healing drum, African wisdom teachings. Some of our great elders and ancestors, who have helped us to better understand the nature of spirituality in African culture. Just want to end in thanking them, for setting the foundation for the types of information in which I have shared with you and will share, in the near future. So I thank you for, listening, and look forward to your feedback. You can hit me up on AsarImhotep.com. Hit me up on Facebook and Twitter. You can search me by my name. I appreciate everything. Peace and blessings to you all. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe to. Peace.